You've probably heard this idea before. As the world gets more modern, religion is just supposed to fade away. But what if that's not the whole story? What if it's way more complicated than that? Today, we're digging into why for some communities, religion is still this incredibly powerful force, while for others, it's almost a distant memory. And the answer? Well, it reveals a pretty surprising truth about power, resistance, and who actually gets the privilege of being secular.
So, for decades, this big idea in sociology was called the secularization thesis. And it's pretty simple, really. The theory goes that as societies modernize, with more science, better education, stable governments, the need for religion just kind of withers. It was almost seen as this universal path that every society was walking down.
Yeah, but here's the thing. That's not what happened. Not everywhere, anyway. In fact, for huge parts of the world, modernity didn't lead to less religion at all. The real story is so much more interesting and, frankly, a lot more complex than a simple fade to black. To really get our heads around this, we're going to look at two incredible case studies that totally break the mold: the Black community in America and the Dalit community in India. Both have gone through all the motions of modernity, yet both have maintained these incredibly high levels of religiosity. The big question is, why? Okay, so to understand why some groups hold on to religion so tightly, we first have to understand how religion can be used against them. Because for those in power, historically, religion has been one of the most effective tools for keeping things exactly as they are. The key concept here is something called legitimization. It's a fancy word, but the idea is actually pretty straightforward. It's when you use religion to make a social order seem not just fair, but divinely ordered. It takes a power structure that humans created and frames it as God's will. It's basically a way of saying, hey, don't question this. This is just how it's supposed to be. And what's just wild is seeing how the same playbook was used in almost identical ways across the world. So in the US, you had a specific version of Christianity used to justify slavery and segregation as the natural order of things. Meanwhile, in India, upper caste Hinduism used concepts like dharma, your sacred duty to your place in society, and karma, the idea that your social position is a result of your past lives, to lock people into a rigid caste system. In both cases, the core religious principle became upholding the social order. It was like giving oppression a divine seal of approval. But, and this is a huge but, here's where things get really interesting. The very same tool that can be used to legitimize power can also be picked up by the oppressed and totally transformed into a powerful weapon for liberation. For communities that are systematically shut out from power, religion starts to serve a completely different set of functions. It's not just about faith anymore. It becomes the one safe space where you can feel fully human. It's often the only institution you truly control. It becomes the central hub for organizing resistance, and it gives you a powerful new story, a counter-narrative where you're not the lowly or the forgotten, but the righteous and the chosen. I absolutely love this phrase. When the state, the justice system, and the rest of civil society all fail a group of people, religion becomes the load-bearing institution. It's forced to carry the entire weight of a community's social, political, and spiritual survival. It's not really a choice, it's an absolute necessity. So this brings us to a crucial point. How did these groups actually use religion to fight back? Well, when you're faced with an oppressive religious system, you really have two main choices. Do you try to change the system from within, or do you just leave it entirely? And this is right where our two case studies split off. In Black America, the strategy was what we can call internal inversion. They took Christianity, the religion of their enslavers, and completely flipped its meaning on its head. For many Dalits in India, though, the strategy was the clean break. Led by the brilliant leader B.R. Ambedkar, this involved a mass conversion away from Hinduism and into Buddhism. And this quote just captures that internal inversion strategy perfectly. Think about it, a story in the oppressor's holy book about an enslaved people being led to freedom. For Black Christians, that wasn't some ancient history, that was a living promise. It became their story. It formed the very heart of a liberation theology that fueled resistance for centuries, from the abolitionist movement all the way to the civil rights era. On the other hand, you have B.R. Ambedkar, who laid out the logic for the clean break. For him, the problem wasn't just how Hinduism was being interpreted, it was the entire framework. He argued that a religion that fundamentally made the caste system sacred was just irredeemable. The only real path to freedom was to get out. And this brings us to a really tough and honestly a somewhat tragic question. Both of these were brilliant, powerful strategies of resistance.
but they had vastly different outcomes. The internal takeover of Christianity turned out to be a much more powerful engine for social change than the clean break from Hinduism. But why? The answer lies in a pretty sobering reality. See, Ambedkar's powerful idea was that if you could just remove the religious justification for caste, the system itself would crumble. But that's not what happened, because caste was never just about religion. It turned out that caste was this deeply embedded social and economic structure. That social stigma didn't just vanish with conversion, it followed Dalit converts right out of Hinduism. They were still seen as Dalits, only now they were Dalit Buddhists, and sometimes that meant facing even more hostility. And here's a crucial difference. Unlike the Black Church, which was already this massive organized institution, Buddhism in India at the time just didn't have the infrastructure to support millions of new converts. The hard truth was that the social structure was stronger than the religious belief used to justify it. Okay, so let's tie all of this together and get back to our first question. This whole comparison reveals something pretty profound about who even gets the option to become secular in the first place. This, right here, is the absolute key. You can afford to let go of your religious institutions when you have other, reliable, secular ones to fall back on. Things like a fair government, a just legal system, a robust civil society, and equal access to science and education. So here's the paradox in a nutshell. European populations, for the most part, secularized because the state and civil society started taking over the jobs that religion used to do. But Black Americans were systematically shut out of those exact same institutions. The church had to stay that load-bearing wall. And Dalits discovered the tragic reality that a secular society can still be deeply discriminatory, meaning their conversion didn't give them a safe landing spot. And that leads us to our final, powerful conclusion. The ability to become secular, to let go of religion as your primary source of identity, community, and support, it's not some natural endpoint of modernity. It's a privilege. And it's a privilege that has historically only been available to people who already feel safe, secure, and served by the secular world around them. So I'll just leave you with this final thought to chew on. When, for centuries, your religious institutions have been the only ones fighting for you, the only ones you can really control, and maybe the only ones you can truly trust, what does it even mean to ask you to let them go?